It is now day 2 of opposition parties calling for Greg Fergus, the Speaker of the House of Commons, to resign.
They do have confidence in Speaker Fergus. You know, we have a tradition in this place of when somebody apologizes that we accept that and we move on.
The Speaker is supposed to go through a fragile process of maintaining its neutrality, impartiality, and that Mr. Fergus failed.
Our recommendation to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs will be to recommend to the House that the Speaker resign.
Okay, so Speaker Greg Fergus is under fire over this video, which was played at the Ontario Liberal Convention this weekend. It was a tribute to outgoing interim leader John Fraser, and Fergus was filmed in the Speaker's office and in his Speaker's robes. Well, the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois says that just shows Fergus cannot be trusted to be politically neutral and nonpartisan in the House of Commons, and all work in the House was stopped for a while today while MPs debated whether this issue should be sent to committee. The Power Panel is going to talk about that. Kate Harrison, Jason Marcussoff, Françoise Boivin, and Michelle Caderio. All right, Jason, first I want to start with you. There's a lot of Inside Ottawa. Rob Benzie called it Planet Ottawa when we were on last night. Let me show you something that was posted on Twitter from Planet Washington. This is from former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. It was my privilege to welcome House of Commons Speaker Greg Fergus to Capitol Hill this morning during Speaker Fergus's first official visit to Washington. So he has 2 parties in the House of Commons calling for him to resign. Pelosi also includes some photos of her visit with Fergus. Jason, do you do that when the House is debating your partisanship and your neutrality? Do you leave town? Do you go to Washington on a diplomatic kind of trip here?
It's curious. I do wonder if this was planned. I don't know much about this. I don't know what reporting's been done on this about whether he's going to see the actual speaker, Mike Johnson, or any of the former speakers who are not of the equivalent of the Liberal Party in the States. I'm not sure, but this is a tough spot for the speaker. I mean, we could be talking about Liz Truss levels of tenure for him. He, as I was listening to some of the debate on this motion today, and both the Bloc and certainly Andrew Scheer, the former Speaker and a House Leader of the Conservatives, talks about how it's very challenging for a Speaker who's supposed to be above reproach and the referee of all the parties to do this when he doesn't have the confidence of 2 of those parties that make up nearly a majority of the House. This is a very tight and unfortunate spot. It seems thus far that the Liberals are defending him. The NDP, who could be this pivotal kind of swing vote, are very much siding with a lot of the points that Andrew Scheer and the Bloc Québécois are making, but not saying outright just yet that he needs to resign too. I don't know how this goes. It could be quite a challenge for it to get better and easier for him because knowing what we've seen from the Conservatives, certainly relenting is not part of their MO.
No, Françoise, that is an accurate statement. That party is not for relenting. But Françoise, I don't get the sense that New Democrats necessarily want Greg Fergus to go. They definitely wanted to go to Proc to come up with some guardrails for the Speaker. But what do you make of this? That, he has to apologize on Monday, and then on Tuesday, he's in Washington, D.C. at a series of events. While we don't know where the vote is going to go, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, and while parties are calling for you to quit, does it seem like a good idea to leave town?
Well, I was so wrong because I thought he was in his office thinking about all this and thinking, especially while I was listening to Vice Chair d'Entremont giving his ruling on the first question of privilege from Andrew Scheer. And I'm thinking, I wonder if the actual speaker should not just step back, because I think his thing is cooked, because he must be thinking before there's a decision, maybe I should do the right thing, a bit like Anthony Rota, and so close to the Anthony Rota episode. Don't let this become the center stage of everything. And we know it doesn't take much between a documentary and this. I mean, This is nuts. It's a nut house. And I'm thinking he's reflecting on this, and then your researchers send us the picture. No, Mr. Fergus is visiting Washington. That's another movie in the making. I just find that there's a disconnect somewhere. And how can you explain this by saying, I thought it was for a private party? Nothing rings like a private little affair than a liberal convention, be it in Ontario. So something is wrong here. Something doesn't add up. And as for the NDP, they might want to go through to the process, so bring it to Proc. It'll be interesting to see with 6 Liberals sitting there and 6 opposition members, how it will unfold. And the quicker, please, the better, because this cannot continue. Jeez.
Well, Michelle, I don't know if this rises to the level of what, it doesn't rise to the level of what Anthony Rota went through. I mean, this was an error in judgment that has caused some problems. But the real world consequence of this, for ordinary Canadians, is that the parliamentary agenda is now kind of derailed in dealing with debate and votes about this. So, like, the grocery and mortgage measures the federal government is trying to pass is kind of delayed. The just transition legislation is debated. Ukraine free trade agreement. All of these things sort of get set aside, while the Senate is now sending back C-234, which is another carbon tax carve-out. I mean, what kind of a situation does all of this put the government's agenda in and the Speaker in?
Well, there's no doubt that this kerfuffle is tying up everything.
Yeah.
I don't think that Canadians are watching. I think that it's actually another example of why there's so few Canadians that pay that much attention to what goes on in the House of Commons. That being said, there's consequential things that are trying to get through, particularly before the House recesses for the fall. The Speaker made a series of missteps and did some things that I wouldn't have advised. But in the end, I think that the opposition is just trying to rile this all up, and he walked into a bit of that kind of partisan trap. If you look at it from 1,000 feet, is it so bad that the Speaker said a goodbye to a leader of a party who was stepping aside? You could make an argument for that if that became something that he did for all parties and of people of all partisan stripes. In fact, it was played at an Ontario Liberal Party convention. Not a good look in his robe. I'm not trying to defend that part, but I think that if we take a big step back, this is not the Anthony Rota situation.
No, not at all. No.
It is not that consequential, and they're just going to be playing, silly games in the House of Commons now for the next few days and slowing everything down.
So, Kate, it is not the Anthony Rota situation.
And I did say that, by the way.
No.
Follows.
Yeah.
Okay, just in case I was...
I was about to build on your point.
Okay.
But it does follow the Anthony Rota situation, as a wise person said not that long ago. And given that context, it feels like you really got to dot the I's and cross the T's, and that has not happened here.
And deal with the consequences of the actions you've taken. Anthony Rota sat through a few days of extremely uncomfortable comments from his colleagues about the situation when the Ukrainian president was here, and rightly so. And I'm sure it was probably some of the most difficult days of his parliamentary life, but he was there. So you can call this a lack of judgment to have this video, to do it in ceremonial garb and to do it in the office. I think to now go to Washington, take pictures with one of the most partisan individuals in the U.S. government, that's not a lack of judgment, that's a lack of respect for the office. So on the principle, I think that the Conservatives are right here insofar as he has demonstrated that he's put partisanship over the office, and it's not a surprise because that is his background. He was the national director of the Liberal Party, he has very partisan roots. But the politics of this, bad for the government, huge distraction at a time when, to your point, they're trying to advance legislation.
I'm running out of time.
And the Conservatives have been given a Christmas gift for their fundraising efforts. It's an Ottawa bubble issue, but it's the kind of thing that their base certainly would respond to, and they're probably on track for one of their best fundraising years ever. This certainly helps that effort.
So Jason, just on the legislative implications for this for the government. So like they were debating it today, they were debating it yesterday. There's going to be votes and debates and amendments and things like this tomorrow. So the issue is that there's only so much time left in the parliamentary calendar between now and the break, and there's legislation the government wants to get through. So they need to find some way to resolve this or invoke closure. And what's just happened now in the Senate is Bill C-234, which is to extend the carve-out on the carbon tax to fuel heating for farmers, has passed in an amended form, which exempts burn heating but extends the carve-out to grain drying. Very technical thing, which means this now has to go back to Parliament, which has already approved it in its earlier form. So when the Senate is ping-ponging legislation back that the House passed over the objections of the government, and now the Speaker has become a distraction and is stopping your legislative agenda, has the government lost control of its legislative agenda because of a series of factors that it hasn't been able to control?
You can pretty easily make the argument that it has. There are a lot of things the government wants to do, and they'll say you're holding back this. But it takes a government and in a minority legislature, it takes all parties to agree on what to do. And if they can't, so they have to be extra careful. And and also having this nonpartisan Senate, that's a risk that they created. Justin Trudeau created with that, and well, occasionally that's going to come home to roost as well.
Francois, do you think there's any buyer's remorse on unleashing the Senate at this point when you get to a minority situation and near the end of the third term?
Oh my goodness! I mean, nothing comes easy. It's incredible. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Justin Trudeau's office right now. He must be saying, "What the hell is going on?" Even when we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, something comes back. If it's not one thing that hits us, it's another one. Where C-234, all the other bills. Now this question of the Speaker. I mean, boy, they must be looking forward to go on the holiday vacation, if they will have any, if they can get over that last drama. Nothing is going easy, but it would be so easy to just not do these stupid things.
Michelle, how do you deal with this from a prime minister's office when the Speaker's office is distant from you and the Senate has been set free independently, and now there's sort of this confluence of things jumbling together?
Well, there's not much you can do with with a hands-on kind of focus. There's no direction that you can give that is going to be received and carried out. What you have to do is make the case for what you're trying to do for Canadians. That you are the elected, you have you were forming a government because Canadians elected you to carry out your agenda. So you have to make your case for your agenda. You have to make the case about why it's in the best interest of Canadians for, your legislation to go forward, for the Parliament to actually operate, and you have to rise above all this petty partisanship. That is, I think, their answer. And I'm not going to pretend in any way that it's easy, but that is actually the only course that they have.
Yeah, Kate, tough to argue for your agenda when you're struggling to advance the agenda.
Yes,
right?
And there needs to be a little bit more message discipline here, and take a bit of a Doug Ford approach to some of these conflicts and issues management. Since day one, the Trudeau government's issue management approach has been, let's try to ride it out. We'll just give it a couple more weeks and see what happens on everything, on SNC, on everything. That has always been their approach. Sever the limb to save the body. Like on something like this Speaker issue, you've got a couple more weeks left. Just deal with it and move on. And bring it back to a focused narrative rather than these process stories which drag the Conservatives taking advantage of kind of legislative maneuvers to extend the pain of this. But the Liberals never do that from an issues management perspective. They just grip and grin and they hope for the best.
But if you drop the Speaker, you lose another day of session because you have to hire a new one. It's all just wonderful.
I know. I mean, look, it's the Spinal Tap drummer of Parliament at this point in time. All right, we got to leave it there. I want to thank the Power Panel, Michelle Cadario, Françoise Boivin, Jason Markusoff, and Kate Harrison.